A lot of challenges that authors face in terms of publishing a book is number one. The big one is not thinking that they're good enough.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi Ewanfo, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started with this episode.
Or not having the right tools or resources to write or even publish their stories. That's a big one. Yeah, not thinking that their story is important enough. Why would anyone listen to my story? Why is my story important? So that's confidence. The second one is lack of knowledge. That's a big one. Not knowing how to publish. There's lots of information on the net about how to self-publish. There's so many technical issues. There's so many different challenges. You've got to find a book cover designer. You've got to find someone who can typeset, do interior design. You've got to find a good editor. So if you don't know where to find these different people, it can be quite overwhelming. And often authors just say, right, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to publish. I'm just not going to do it. That's one of the big ones. Another one is a lot of authors say that they don't have enough time. They've written an amazing book, but they haven't got time to understand how to publish the book themselves, which is where we come in. We offer the tools and the resources for them to be able to publish their book. We've got a knowledgeable team of people who, editors, typesetters, cover designers, illustrators. We've got a distributor that, all under one roof that actually helps to create, publish and distribute the book. So one of the biggest challenges authors face is just not knowing how to publish their book or get their story out there. Those of African heritage, we pass on information through the ancient times through storytelling, through verbal storytelling, and then at some point the languages got broken up. A lot of things got lost in translation. Some of those stories have been lost, and so I think it's so important for us to create our own platforms so we can tell our own stories. So often in TV, in film, in media, in books, when someone else tells our stories, we're not in charge of how we're represented. And so if we're not in charge of how we're represented, any story can be made. So when you're telling your own story authentically, it reaches the hearts of the people. It also preserves your story, your background, your heritage, your own oral traditions, through it being here in a physical book that can be read for generations to come, after we're gone. I think if you're comparing it to when I grew up in the 80s, I didn't see anything like this. I didn't know of any Black publishers. I didn't see any, I didn't even see any characters that looked like myself. Mainstream, yes, things may have changed to a degree, but again, those statistics I said to you, right now, only 5% of main characters in children's literature contain a Black or brown character, or a character of minority ethnic character, they call. So mainstream, they may not be doing it, but what's happening now, we're seeing more happen. I mean, there's different ways of writing a book. I think a lot of people think writing a book means you've got to write, 500 pages of really detailed. But you can write a poetry book. We've got one of our authors, Vicky Nyanga's written a book called The Diaspora Experience, and she's also written a book called The Prism of Her Thoughts, which is poetry about her experience of being a Black woman. Poetry of others' experiences of being from the African diaspora, or being a migrant in this country, or being a refugee. So it doesn't always have to be a really intricate, really difficult book to write. It could be poetry. It could be, so behind me here, I don't know if you can see. Yeah. I can't quite, there you go. It's a book, I've got it here. We've got a book here called 101 Black Inventors and Their Inventions. So this author here teamed up with an illustrator. She researched 101, doesn't have to be 101, but figures that are important in your community, writing a page or a paragraph about each of them. Having a skeleton, having an idea, first of all, start with an idea. What is it that you want to get across? What is it that you want to preserve? How are you going to share your story? Do you want to do that through verse? Do you want to do that through a non-fiction information book? Are you going to have illustrations? Or do you want to write, a fiction story that is representative of your culture? Not everybody's a born writer. You don't have to be, you just have to have this story inside. Seek help, seek people who can help you write. Seek a writing coach, seek an editor. If you don't know how to publish a book, seek out publishers who have your story at heart and understand the value and importance of having your story told authentically. So no person is an island. You can't do everything yourself. And if there's things that you struggle with, writing or publishing, seek those people out who can help you. Form a group of people. Maybe you want to get stories from other people. Get those stories, short stories from other people and put them together in a book. There's so many different ways to preserve stories. There was no course that I did that said this is how you write a book. I read a lot, so I understand the format of books. My first book was a non-fiction book, which I found a lot easier. Telling stories is very different to writing a non-fiction book. So just knowing what a tip that I give to authors is, when you have an idea, first of all, work out who your audience is and what your message is and why you're writing those books. Those two things are really important. Once you've got that, map out your chapter headings. Let's say 12 chapter headings. Underneath those chapter headings, write down some notes. What's your key message here? What are your key events? What are your key themes in this particular chapter? So bullet point what you're going to put in each chapter. What tips or advice you're going to put in each chapter. That forms the skeleton of your book. The more you read, the more it becomes natural. Fiction is very different. There's a lot of things to consider. I mean, I can't kind of go through the whole thing in one interview, but you can look up things like, it's called the hero or heroine's journey, which takes you through how a character should develop through a story. There's lots of writing courses online. I recommend, there's lots of masterclasses you can do with a company called Jericho Writers, which is online. There's a plethora of information about how to write a book, or to how to create a plot line, or to develop characters. There's a lot of information out there, but my biggest tip would be, if you want to be a writer, read a lot. Get the idea of how to structure a book.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehe Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehe Ewanfo. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.